Today I am going to take you out on an epic fantasy adventure. This is a tale of bravery, where you venture out into this vast world and take out some bad enemies. Or maybe you turn bad yourself, we don't know what happens, because in this game you will use this quest book, and in this book you will get different choices that you have to choose between. Depending on which road you will choose, well, you will end up in completely different places. So this is like a real life RPG storybook action game, and depending on where you go in this world, the table in front of you will of course look different, and you will meet different types of enemies. In this video I am going to take you through this game. I'm going to show you how the setup might look, but also what the different cards means and what you can actually do out on the map. So this here is what the setup might look. Again, it is all according to this quest book. Here you can see the setup and how the tiles are supposed to be laid out, which enemies you are facing and where your party should start. Once you have placed out everything according to the book, you also need to set up the different cards. We have some items, we have some abilities, we also have some companions, but I'm going to show you more about this in a bit. As I showed you, we also need to place out the enemies on the map, according to the storybook. But then we also need to take the enemies' cards. And depending on which enemies you are facing, these will of course be different. But you also need to have their behavior card. As you can see up here, it says which type the behavior card belongs to. These cards determines what the enemies will do when the battle starts. Each player of course also needs to take a character that they would like to portray as. And they need to take both of these player sheets. One where you have the main abilities of the character, and here down here you have some more add-ons. Again, I will tell you more about this in a bit. On the background you will have the story of the character and the wounded side of the character card. Up here we have a power chart. This will determine how bad the enemies are that you will meet. And to the side here we have a map of this land. So in this game you are a part of a hero party venturing out into this world, and you will take on different quests. Like I said at the start, depending on which road you choose in this big storybook, different things will of course happen. You will be able to build up your characters to make them stronger as the story goes along. You will also be able to get items, companions, and of course the more experience you get, well, the harder the game will also become. This game is played out during a series of different missions, meaning that you won't be able to finish this in one night, because this is a quite big and epic adventure. Now, before I show you the actual gameplay out on the board, let's take a look at all the cards and what they mean. So this here could be your character. Here we have a picture showing what the character looks like. And here we have the name of this character. Here we have this character's characteristic. Here we have 3 specializations that are available for this character to take on, and the starting outfit. Meaning that whatever states here is what this character starts with on their journey, and should be placed next to the character. This sheet down here is this character's skill sheet. Above the skills you can see the ruling characteristic that these skills is coupled up with. Meaning that these skills down here are attached to the psych up here. I will show you more about this in a bit. And down here at the bottom we will write down our unspent experience points. When you have chosen your hero and you have picked up the starting equipment and any condition, you also need to choose a specialization. This is an area where you are, well, a specialist in, but you can only choose the ones that states on your character's card. And you need to choose one of the 3 available. Once you have done that, well, the rest of the cards goes back into the box. Now let's take a look at the different cards. These cards here are the ability cards, which will give your character an ability that is stated down here. At the top, you can see the name of that ability. The ability cards are cards that will, well, give your character special abilities. But not only your character, because these can also be assigned to your companions, but also the opponents. And these will be used in the skill test that you will be facing during your journey. In the middle, we have a condition. These are conditions that your hero might get along their journey. Some of these will be good for them and others will be bad. Again, we have a name at the top of the card, and in the middle we have a text explaining what this condition does. And at the bottom we have the icons showing the effect of this condition. The conditions are cards that will be used during different skill tests. So the quest book might ask you if you have a certain condition. And if you do, well, it might be good or bad for you. And some of these characters actually start with a condition. And you can see that by looking at their starting outfit. And here we have magic spells. Again, we have the name on the top, but here we have the amount of experience points that you need to learn this spell. And here you can see what you need in your inventory to be able to cast the spell. In the middle, we again have a text stating what happens when you cast this spell. To decide, you will find different symbols. Either a symbol showing if this is a lasting spell or an instant spell, but there will also be symbols here showing effects or environmental hazard generated by the spell. And at the bottom you will find icons showing the skill and characteristics used for spell casting, but also for retaining magic. And of course we also have a bunch of equipment cards. We see the name, we see some artwork of the equipment itself, and then we have a description of what the equipment does, along with icons showing the effect of the equipment. And at the bottom of some cards we can also see the card's buy and sell value. Now, to equip your equipment that you have, you simply place them in your player area. But you also need to show where on your body these equipments are. If you have the armor on yourself, you need to place an armor token to indicate that you are wearing this armor. If you are not wearing the armor, you need to put a backpack on that armor instead, to show that now you are carrying it in your backpack. When it comes to equipment that you hold in your hand, you need to indicate this by putting a hand token on that equipment. Just be aware, because some of these items needs two hands to be held. Meaning that in this case you need to put 2 hand tokens on this equipment. And now you can't hold anything else in your hands, because, well, you only have 2 hands. Now you can only have 3 items at a max in your backpack. But every time you find a new item, this one here for example, you get to rearrange your items. Meaning that you can throw something out, put something more in, or change the things that you have in your hands. When it comes to spell cards, there are no upper limit on how many spells you can have. But to be able to have and get the spells, you need to fulfill the requirements and also pay the cost to actually learn the spells. You may also trade equipment or items with your fellow players, but in that case you need to use a hand over or take action. And this can only be done during a fight, recuperate, trade, or recruit action. So that was the equipment card, the condition cards, the spells and abilities. But there are 2 more cards, and these cards are companions and retreats, and these are kind of your followers that will follow you out on your journey in this big world. But what do they do? A retinue can be recruited. These will not join into battles or brawls, but they will help you during skill tests. To recruit a retinue, you need to do a recruit action, but you also need to pay the recruitment cost at the bottom of the card. The retinue is then assigned to one of your characters in the party, and a player can never have more than one retinue to each character. The retinue then provides a skill bonus to the character that they are attached to. The retinues comes in 3 different experience levels. We have Novice, Skilled and Elite. Which brings us to the Power chart. Because this is a chart that determines how mean your opponents are, but also which type of routine you should have. Going from Novice or mean opponent to skilled and ranging opponents, or elite routine and brutal opponents. Your party will start at 0 experience points because, well, you have just started your journey. But as you tick these boxes, you will slowly go over to the other rows. Meaning that the danger level of your enemies and the missions will also go up. As you can see, very easy at the start has 0. But in the second row it has 1, the third 2 and the fourth 3. Meaning that as you gain more experience, the danger level will also rise. So that was the routine cards. They are kind of followers going around, sticking by your side, but they are hiding when a battle or brawl comes. They only help you if there is a skill check. If they ever leave your side, meaning leaving the party, well then their bonus will of course also go away. But you also have something that is called companions in this game. Just like a retrine, the companion is also attached to one of the characters in the party. But these are actually playable out in battles and brawls. And you can see their stats out here to the left. You have their HP, this is the danger level to hit them. Their attack value, their mind value, how big the character is, and how many movements they have. Down here you can see what type of weapon your companion has, but also their ability. And these are the only abilities and weapons that they will have. So these characters are controlled by the player that controls the character it is attached to. And they work pretty much like any other player out on the map itself. Except that they can't pick anything up from the ground, they can't have equipment, but other than that they're pretty much just like any other fighter. And these companions can be attained in different ways. You can get them through a quest, but you can also summon them through magic. But if you summon them through magic, well, they will go away by the end of the battle or brawl. But a companion that you get through a quest will stick with you until they unfortunately die. So now we have looked at all the player cards that we might get on our journey. And it's time for us to actually look at the map to understand how the map works. So this here are the map tiles. As you can see, we have numbers out on the corner of the map tiles. These numbers are for identifying which tiles you should use during the setup. And as you can see, there are many different small squares on the map tiles. And there's also a bunch of small numbers. These are reference numbers, and they are used to determine the enemy's movement. As you can see, there's also a bunch of small rings. These are to determine line of sight, meaning that if you can draw a straight line from one circle to another circle, you will have line of sight. But if there's anything blocking the line, you will not have line of sight. So over here, for example, we have one circle going to another circle. And here you cannot draw a straight line because, well, the building is in the way and you do not have X-ray vision. So here you would not have a line of sight. There will also be some red lines out on some of the maps. These lines cannot be passed by players or enemies. To pass these, you need to go around. On the buildings we can also see a number. These numbers indicate how many players but also enemies that can fit inside of the building. A normal player character or a normal enemy would have the size of 1. But some of the characters in this game, for example the magic bear, will have a bigger size. Meaning that this bear here would take up 2 of the spots in this building. Each of the different squares out on the map represents one move for the different characters. Before we get into the action out on the map, one player needs to do a skill test. I will show you how this is made in a bit, to see if we get some bravery tokens. These bravery tokens are used to enhance our results, meaning that if we get a result that we did not really like, well, we can spend these bravery tokens to get some more successes that we might really need. Now, let's take a look at the board itself and what the players can do during the player phase. During a player's turn, they can choose to do a movement and an action. There are a lot of actions that the different players can do out on the map, so let's start with the movement. To see how many spaces you can move, you simply need to look at your character board. Here you can see we have the move space, and it says 4. Your move is equal to your dexterity. In this case, that is 4. That means that the ranger here can choose to move up to 4 steps out on the map. But they could of course also choose to move less. If you move into an area with an opponent that has a one-handed weapon or a two-handed weapon, you instantly become pinned in that location. Enemies that has ranged weapons does not cause pin. To be pinned means that you cannot move away from this area before these damn bastards are killed. And now the only action you can use is simply to attack. So when you have moved your character out on the board, you can now do an action. Let's start by looking at the one that is the biggest one, the attack action. As we can see here, we are placed in the middle of the board. So we are not nearby any enemies, but this fella here has a ranged weapon. But how far can he reach? Well, then we would need to look at the weapon card. And as we can see here, it says range 4 areas. And this is the amount of areas out on the map that this weapon will reach. And as we can see, our friend the ranger here is 2 areas within reach of these bad boys here, and 2 areas within reach for these bad girls over here. So the ranger could actually choose to attack the ones over here, but also the ones over here. And we can also see that the small circle has a clear line between them without any objects in the way. So he also have line of sight. But to be able to know if the ranger actually hits and damage his victims, we first need to do a skill check. And before we do the skill check, we need to figure out how many die we get to roll. As we can see on our weapon, this is a two-handed weapon. And as we can see down here, below dexterity, the ranger actually has 2 next to his two-handed bows and crossbows skill. But we also need to look at his dexterity value up here, which is 4. This means that the ranger will be able to roll 6 die. 2 plus 4. But how do we know that he actually hit? Well, this is where the power chart comes into play. Because now we need to look at our enemy's card to see what kind of danger level we need to beat. As we can see on our enemy's card, she has an armor of danger level 1. But what does that mean? This means that we need to look at the power chart in the level that we're at. At the moment, we're still just at the start here. Our enemy's card said 1, meaning that we need to beat easy. And we need 1 success to actually damage this archer. But if we would have been in a higher level, we would have needed at least 2 successes to hit this archer. Every 5 or 6 that you roll is counted as a success. Meaning that in this case, you managed to hit this archer twice. So now her HP goes from 4 down to 2. So that's the way you move in and attack. And depending on which type of weapon you have, you need to calculate this differently. So if you move in unarmed, well, you would need to look at your unarmed part. But if you have an axe or a bow and so on, the result of dice that you need to roll is different. And this is the way all skill tests in this game would work. You first need to look at your bottom part to see if you have any bonuses on the skill that you need to complete. Then you need to add that with whatever you have on the top of your player card. That result is the amount of die you get to roll. If you get 5 or 6, that is a success. And depending on where you are on the power charts, you will need to have different amount of successes. And of course, the higher you get on this power sheet, well, the harder it's gonna get. Casting a spell works pretty much the same way as a skill check or an attack. If we have paid the cost to learn this skill, we can now cast the spell. But we need the requirements stated here to the right. Earth 2 and Mercury 2. But as we can see, the mage here already have those requirements. Now we need to see how many die we get to roll. And here we can see to cast the spell, we need physique combined with the earth element. We need to look at how much physique we have, which is 4, and how much earth we have, which is 3. Meaning that when we cast this spell, we get to roll 7 die. 4 plus 3. If we manage to cast this spell successfully, we need to see on the card what will happen. And if we do not manage to pass the skill test, something might also happen. Now every time we have cast a spell, we also need to retain magic. Here we again need to take the different symbols we have here and add up that amount of die. Here we have reason, meaning 3. We have Mercury down here, meaning 2. And lastly, any modification bonuses. Then we again need to add up that result and throw the die. If we are successful, we can cast this spell again, because we still have the ingredients left to do this at least one more time. But if we fail, we need to deplete this and we may not cast it again until the party performs a recuperate action. Every now and then you will also have some kind of objective going out on the board that will need you to do a skill check. Then you would simply move up to that object or whatever the quest is and do a skill check to see, again according to the power chart, if you get the successes needed to beat the level you are in. And that was the attack actions. They are pretty much the biggest action in this game and are also the action that takes a little bit of brain energy to just calculate how many die you need and how you actually get the damage here, what danger level you need to pass, and so on. The rest of the actions are really easy. A player may, as a free action, drop an item in the area where they are, but this does not count as one of your actions. And another player may spend one of their action to pick up this equipment. If they choose to pick up the equipment from the ground, they may immediately and for no cost use the action equip unequipped. And you can pick up any number of equipment from the ground. And as I said, you can for free choose to equip and unequip your equipment at the same time as you pick up an equipment from the ground. But you can of course also use an action to equip or unequip equipment when you do not pick up an item from the ground. To do the equip or unequip action, you simply move the little tokens around on the equipment in front of you. You were holding the swords with 2 hands, but now you instead hold the knife with 1 hand. Then you can choose to hand over and or take equipment from your fellow players. But then you would also need to use an action. But when you get a new equipment from another player, then you would be able to do the equip or unequipped action for free. You could spend 1 action to prepare to attack. This will give you an even fiercer and more powerful attack during your next turn. If you choose to do this, you can move maximum 1 step during this turn. And when you will attack the next time, you will get a plus 2 skill bonus for preparing your attack. But to be able to use the bonus, the next action should be either an attack or a new prepare to attack action. Otherwise, the bonus will go away. A player may prepare for an attack several times, meaning that the skill bonus will add up. And the mage can do the exact same thing when she tries to cast a spell. She can prepare and prepare and prepare to make her final blow really strong. The next action is strike to pin, and this is kind of an unarmed attack against your opponent. You would perform a skill check, and for every success you get, the opponent is pinned and cannot do anything during the opponent phase. For each excess success that you get, they will be pinned for another turn. Meaning that if you get 3 successes, well, this opponent ain't going nowhere or doing nothing for 3 opponent phases.
You can also choose to just do nothing during your turn.
And that is the actions that the players can do during the player phase. Once all players have done their turn and moved and attacked or whatever they wanted to do, it's time for the enemy's phase. And they will act according to the behavior cards. As I showed you during setup, the enemies have behavior cards. And here it quite clearly says what they will do. Going from 1 down to the last option. Meaning that we start up here, but if that is not possible, we go down to number 2. If that is not possible, well, we go down to number 3. So in this case here, for example, the fighter would move up to and attack the target. But if the opponent has reach ability, they would stop in the closest area, where she can perform the attack on the target. Now, to determine which target the enemy will move against, we can see a target condition down here. This one here will move to the player out on the field with the lowest hit points. As we can see here, the move value from this enemy is 3 steps, meaning that they would move 3 steps or they would move until they reach their target. Down here you can see which weapon this enemy will attack you with. In this case, the club 1D, which is the kind of a cheap weapon. And up here you can see the attack value they will attack you with. Each player character has hit points to the value of their strength and physique. In this case 6, as we can see that the physique is 2 and the strength is 4, giving us a total of 6. If this ever comes down to 0, we need to flip this card to the wounded side. Here we can see that the stats are a little bit different. If we again end up on 0 on our HP on the wounded side, well then this character is removed from the board. When the opponent is done with their phase, we usually go back to the player phase, and that's the way we keep on going until, well, eventually the enemies are gone or we are gone as well. But in some scenarios we have a phase number 3 as well. This is the environmental hazard phase. Environmental hazard could be, for example, a fire, but it could also be a flood. These hazards have different intensities, going from 0 to 3. If it has an intensity of 0, it will not spread. But if it has an intensity of, for example, 1, it will spread 1 area each round, and it will spread to the area with the lowest reference number. In this case, over here. But if it had an intensity with 3, it would instead move 3 squares out on the board. If a player character or an opponent are standing in an area that is burning at the end of the turn, they will lose 2 HP. If this instead would have been a flood, they would not take instant damage. They would instead have to test their physique and their mind. If they fail the test, they take 1 HP of damage. But if they pass, there's no damage taken. What I just showed you out on the map now, that was a battle. But in this game we have battles and we have brawls. Again, the quest book will tell you if you are in a battle or in a brawl. And there is quite a big difference here, because in a brawl you may only use your fist, meaning that you will go into this little conflict here unarmed. You are not allowed to use weapons, shields, magic, even defense magic is not allowed in a brawl. You simply go in to a knuckle fight. Now we have seen how a battle or a brawl works. Again, the quests will look different depending on which mission you are doing. Some of these missions will have you do other objectives than just killing other enemies. And some of them will, as you saw here, have environmental damage as well. But basically you move through the player's phase where the players do all of their actions that they want to do. Then you have the enemy's phase where they do the actions according to their behavior card. And you might have a third phase with environmental damage. Once we have gone through the mission and either completed it or failed, we, after finishing it, have an upkeep phase. And this is where we have 3 different options. The first one is the recruit action. Here you will have the possibility to recruit a new routine. But before we do that, we need to pay 5 pennies as an upkeep. And if we do not have 5 pennies, we can instead sell any of the equipment that we have, equal to the amount of 5 pennies. Now, to figure out which level of routine we can recruit, we again need to look at the power chart. And we are still in the first level here, meaning that we can only recruit novice routines. But if we would have been in the middle, we would have been able to hire skilled routines, and in the last column, elite routines. We then draw 1 routine at random and place face up in the play area. Now we need to pick 1 player from the group to test the skill of eloquence at danger level 0. For each success they get, meaning a 5 or a 6, they get to draw 1 more routine that they might be able to recruit. But if they do not manage to get any successes, well, we have to do with the one we got. Lastly, we need to pay the price for recruiting this routine. In this case, 1 penny. And here you cannot trade any equipment to pay this cost. It needs to be a penny. As a final step of upkeep, the players now have a chance to trade their items. The second upkeep action is the recuperate action. Here again we also need to pay 5 pennies, and if we can't pay, we can trade in any equipment. But here we need 1 character to test their medicine skill instead. And if we get 1 or more successes, all of the characters that are wounded can now flip their cards back to their unwounded side. And for each success they also get HPs according to that number. If we have any mages here that have any cards that have been spent because they couldn't fulfill the routine Cryoments, those cards are now active and back on the hand again. Now we also have a chance to use all our XP that we have not used before to learn more skills. And again we have the choice of trading in between the players. The last available upkeep action is to trade. Again we need to pay the 5 pennies or trade in equipment equal to the amount of 5 pennies. Once we have done that, we get to draw 1 common item from the deck at random. Now 1 character in the group tests haggle to see if they are able to get more equipment. Again we test this skill against danger level 0. And for each success you get to draw 1 uncommon item as well. But if you don't manage to get any more successes, well, you just have that 1 common item. But after we have received this common item, the players will still have a chance to buy the items that was shown before, if they have the money of course. But the party now also have a chance to sell any items that they do not want anymore, again for the price at the bottom, or exchange the equipment between the players. When you have completed a quest, you usually get experience points, and these can be spent out on either your skills or your characteristics. Now, depending on what you want to raise and improve, it will cost you different amount of experience. And there are a little sheet in the rulebook telling you how much you need to spend. But for a new skill, for example, it will only cost you 1. Meaning that you simply take your unspent experience points that you have just received or saved to raise that skill. But eventually, as the skills goes up, they will cost you more. And to raise a characteristic of the player will cost you 8 experience points. So they are quite expensive. You can of course also spend XP to learn new magic. The cost for learning a new magic spell is stated on the magic card itself. When you have added the experience level to your fighters or heroes, do not forget to add the new information to the power chart, as this one really is the foundation on how this game is balanced, how hard the opponents are, how hard the quests will be, the skill test, but also your retreats, your followers, everything is balanced on this sheet. So if you forget this one, well, you will have a pretty unbalanced game. And of course you have a campaign sheet where you can save down all your information, your equipment, your skills, and what type of followers you have, so you will remember this to the next game. That, my friend, was A Tale of Bravery, an epic, huge fantasy campaign for you. Bunch of different quests. You have a lot of different choices in this game. There are so many things for the players to do, and I think that if you are into old school RPG, character building, quest taking games, well, this is probably right down your alley. I had a lot of fun with this game, and of course you can play this game solo. In that case, you would simply need to control several characters at the same time, which is no problem, right? So if you want a big, huge, epic fantasy adventure, well, here it is. The artwork in this game is classic fantasy. I would almost call it a bit old school, and I say that in the best way possible, because I think that some of the newer artwork when it comes to fantasy just becomes a little bit too much for me. This is scaled down, but it's still quite detailed. It's realistic, and it really gives you the feeling of being in this old Britain country, fighting dragons, using your swords, and just making it from quest to quest as an epic, epic adventure. The quest book is filled up with missions, but also different quests for you to take. I mean, just look at this. In all of these little pages here, you have a choice. You can choose to haggle your way out of it, talk your way out of it. You can choose to be the bad guy, you can choose to be the good guys. There are a lot of choices for the players to make, and I love when the players have active choices, because that makes the game just a little bit more real. If you only have one path forward and you have no choices to go, well, then the consequences of what you do does not really matter that much, does it? But here it actually makes a difference. That was A Tale of Bravery for you, my friend. An epic, huge, fantasy, story-driven, quest-making, hero-building game. There are so much for the players to do in this game, and I can't wait for this to actually hit Kickstarter and see how it goes. This is quite brilliant. If you want to know more about this game, there are of course links down in the description, my friend, so be sure to check them out if you want to know more about Tale of Bravery. If you like this channel, well, why not subscribe to it? Maybe give me a thumbs up, maybe just throw in a comment there for me, or just say hi, whatever. But most importantly, my friend, until next time, please do not forget to keep on spreading that board gaming love I know you all have. Peace.